Hi, and welcome to Conversations with Des. I'm your host, Des Blanchfield. Today, I have the privilege of being joined by Kevin Shatzkamer. Now, Kevin is the Vice President and General Manager of Service Provider Strategy and Solutions inside the Infrastructure Solutions Group division at Dell Technologies. Kevin, great to see you. Thanks for making time to join me.
Thank you for having me today.
Now, I'd like to introduce you to my audience and just give them a little background and bio on you, just because you've got such an amazing role here. So Kevin is the Vice President and General Manager of Service Provider Strategy and Solutions at Dell Technologies. So he heads up strategy and architecture evolution of the intersection points of network infrastructure technologies, cloud, virtualization platforms, and software programmability. His role encompasses a broad remit, including industry strategy and investment analysis, business development, and go-to-market activities, technical architectures and engineering, infrastructure evolution, and futures planning. So that's, you can see he's got quite broad shoulders for that amazing role. He's also responsible for leading the Dell Technologies 5G strategy in close collaboration with industry-leading technology providers globally. And the one that I'm most envy of, Kevin also represents Dell Technologies on the World Economic Forum, Global Futures Council on new network technologies, and in particular 5G related. Kevin, that's an amazing just collection of things that you cover in a broad remit there. Your role in general encompasses such a broad remit from business strategy to end-line solutions. I wonder if you could give us a sense of, what is a day in the life of Kevin Shatzkamer like? What are some of the biggest challenges you're currently working on?
Yeah, I like the way you really put it in terms of linking the business remit into technology. So just for some background, I come from a technologist background, from an engineering background, and the vast majority of my history in this industry early on was very focused on engineering architecture in the 2G and 3G world. And now as we've moved into 4G, second half of 4G, and now into 5G, my focus continues to be on looking at technology, understanding technology evolution and trends, but putting them much more in a business context. I think that we sometimes as an industry get lost on technology evolution for the sake of technology. And as we look at 5G, as we continue to search for the right business models, the right use cases, the right enterprise go-to-market motions, and the right opportunities to capitalize and leverage 5G as transformative in terms of business outcomes for our customers of our customers, so essentially the customers of the telecommunications carriers, it's really important for us to have a lens that allows us to link those business outcomes to technology. It's how I focus in the World Economic Forum. It's how I focus on a day-to-day, day in the life of work, and really looking at how do we think about technology? Where do we see those technology trends impacting business outcomes? What needs to happen in the broader scheme of the logistics, the operational aspects, the skill sets of the workforce, the acquisition of talent, innovation programs, and structural transformations to make those technologies consumable and ready to operate at scale? And then how do we ensure that we as Dell Technologies are doing the right things for the industry, collaborating with the right set of partners, building the right set of ecosystems, and certainly touch pointing and calibrating our strategy on a very regular basis with our top 20, 25 telecommunications carriers to ensure that the direction we're going and how we're investing in this business are aligned with how our customers expect to see us play a role.
There's no secret that communication service providers, or CSPs, and enterprise customers are under increasing pressure to achieve both reduced time to market for new services and offerings, as well as reduced time to ROI as they develop various solutions to edge networking and the various edge networking use cases such as virtual RAN, CDN, multi-access edge computing, and so forth. With real challenges around things like form factor, which I'm sure is a big part of your world, power and performance, and particularly compliance. I wonder if you can give us some insight on how Dell's going about meeting this opportunity.
Yeah, we've been in this transition towards software-defined and virtualized for the last several years. We obviously have had a lot of good success points as an industry in core networks, now moving towards edge networks, and to your point, virtualization of the radio access network, use cases like multi-access edge computing coming to the forefront. I think what we've learned is if you try to move faster than technology, you run into challenges. But more importantly, what we've learned is that if you try to move faster than your operational readiness to adopt that technology, you tend to run into even bigger challenges. And you start to live in this little bit of a trough of disillusionment that technology isn't working out the way you expected it to, largely because you aren't organized and capable of absorbing the technology in the way that it needs to be used to be as transformative as you would like. So as we kind of think about this next evolution at the edge and we talk about virtual RAN, the means of operation from an industry perspective and the way we engage are very much focused on really three vectors. One is, where is technology in terms of its curve of maturity and readiness? And how do we prove out the technology readiness of various parts of what we're working on and help our customers understand an adoption curve related to that technology? Number two is, what is the operational readiness of the customer to be able to absorb and put this technology into scaled operations? And then number three, what is the readiness of the supply chain and the logistics that sit behind the technology for being able to ensure that infrastructure is where it needs to be, when it needs to be, that quality is at the right level, that supply chains are secure, and at the end of the day, that all of the pieces that go into transforming industries, transforming business models, transforming operational models are all in place. We try really, really hard not to live in the use cases and the opportunities that 5G, especially in edge computing, will bring 10, 15 years down the road, and instead find those inklings of opportunities now that prove readiness, that prove real business cases, that prove out real use cases, and that demonstrate that there are these new business outcomes that can be driven.
Well, with that in mind, there's no secret that Dell's had a really strong multi-decade relationship with Intel, and leveraging Intel's broad portfolio from compute to memory, storage, networking, et cetera. And with everything you were just outlining there, I was really excited to see that Dell announced significant performance gains by leveraging the new second generation Intel Xeon Scalable processor. And in the context of the whole shift to software-defined everything, software-defined infrastructure, software-defined networking, NFV, NFVI, and as you just said, that the shift to edge of networking, edge computing. I wonder if you can share some detail around the performance gains you've seen as a result of Intel's new second generation Xeon Scalable processor, and particularly how they play into the communication service provider industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say that the relationship with Intel certainly scales beyond and is broader than just a vendor-supplier relationship. I think that both Dell and Intel have aligned viewpoints in terms of how this industry matures and how virtualization and software-defined get consumed by the industry. And we work very closely across the entire spectrum of joint innovation, joint solution development, ecosystem building, all the way out to joint go-to-market motions to ensure that we can have proof points and move the industry along in a way that, like I said earlier, is consumable but aligned between Dell and Intel. So if we look at the partnership, it's everything from collaborating on working and proving out technology. It is working on and ensuring that we integrate the best of what Intel is bringing to market, such as the second generation scalable Xeon processors. It is working together with point customers and ecosystem partners to be able to collaborate and understand where and how the technologies can be absorbed and where and how we see those benefits. So in the case of this particular instance, as we talk about these second generation Xeon scalable processors, what we're seeing is capabilities ranging up to 25% performance bumps. And this is really important for the industry because especially as we get to the edge, we're space constrained, we're power constrained, we're form factor constrained. So it's really important to be able to add additional workload density through more cores and more threads. It's really important to continue to increase the base frequencies to higher levels in order to improve performance of those workloads. It's really important to have turbo capabilities and be able to burst up to support additional or occasional on-demand capabilities that those workloads will have. And then at the end, it's really important to have more cache inside of these processors because the transaction performance that's required is growing at an order of magnitude. When we look at the edge, it's really the realization of the next cloud. it's applications running at the edge, it's content being running at the edge, it's data processing, it's AI, it's machine learning use cases that will all move towards real-time needs at the edge, right? Whether that's the on-prem edge or the edge of the CSP itself. So when we start to put all of this together, we need to have all of those things working in parallel. And then in addition to that, ensure that the ecosystem is able to take advantage of that. The virtualization stacks, both virtual machine-based as well as Kubernetes-based, can take advantage of that. It's important that the application providers and the network function workloads can take advantage of that. And I think that the role that Intel plays is not just building great technology, but it's ensuring that the ecosystem is ready to adopt that technology.
Indeed, and in fact, I really liked your point around the co-creation aspect of the relationship between Dell Technologies and Dell and Intel in general, in that from the early clean sheet of paper design of creating new technologies, whether it's CPUs in this case, and all the ecosystem around it, through to the types of approaches to the technologies. And certainly as we have a number of these that are challenging service providers of all types, whether it's communications or others, or just enterprise users, they're being faced with big data, analytics, cloud, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and then along comes the communication disruption of 5G and IoT and edge computing and edge networking. I imagine there's also a large aspect where you co-create and collaborate from the professional services side of things as well. So it's not just purely the technology aspect of things you can kick your toe on, but also working closely with some of these large organizations in the carrier space and service provider space of just working from professional service consulting of, here are some of the challenges you're going to face, here's how we're addressing that. What are some of those journeys like? How early on do you get involved, both yourselves as Dell and Dell Technologies and Intel, in those conversations? I imagine they must be right up front as early as possible to help provide that guidance to the CSPs around how to approach some of these big challenges like IoT and Edge and 5G.
Absolutely. So if we look in the last year, Dell Technologies has signed collaboration agreements with Orange out of France. We signed collaborations and MOU with AT&T to go explore edge computing automation. We've signed relationships with South Korea Telecom to be able to go deliver multi-access edge computing, and various other relationships that we continue to engage in. It is absolutely important to be with the customer along an 18-month journey, even before we start to see technology become production, in order to help them understand how that technology gets integrated into their working models going forward. And more importantly, helping them understand this next set of use cases and business models that the enterprise are demanding, and where we can start to leverage, especially 5G and edge computing, as key enablers to new businesses or key enhancements to existing businesses. And I think that's an area that we as an industry are spending an increasing amount of time in, is looking for those opportunities. We can talk about connected vehicles, we can talk about remote surgery use cases while flying in an autonomous drone all we want. But these are 15, 20-year out use cases. And instead, I think what we need to continue to prove out is that there's opportunities to bring differentiation using 5G and edge computing now, that it enables new businesses, that it helps accelerate breakaway for businesses who are early adopters of these technologies. And we need to continue to tease out the right set of use cases that can demonstrate the capabilities and how the integration of 5G and edge computing, you mentioned AI, machine learning, keep on going down the list, can be made real, rather than living in science fiction that are much, much further out from reality.
Indeed. And I imagine one of the biggest challenges that both yourselves, Dell and Dell Technologies and Intel, have is that you've actually got to create the next wave of technology. You've got to be ahead of the curve, and you've got to develop and engineer and build and prepare and manufacture and be ready to ship the technologies before the wave hits. I'm curious to get your thoughts on, we've got so much data moving around these networks now, and the pivot to the edge design principles. Having the machine learning and AI capabilities built directly into this new second generation Intel Xeon Scalable processor must be beyond a game changer, because now you're not having to offload that somewhere else to what might have originally been a GPU to do some heavy math. Now you can do it in the actual platform itself.
Yeah, as you kind of think about the evolution of data, what's happened is we've moved from big centralized data lakes where I had less time sensitivity of data, and I could act on them over time, and I can build machine learning. I can train machine learning models on big centralized pools of data. But over time, what we continue to see is that the window of relevancy of data continues to decrease. And in addition to that, the amount of data that's generated at the edge rather than towards the core and within the data center continues to grow. So the ability to move compute closer to where data plays out is just a foundational model for how we build big data models and for the entire history of big data. So because data is now generated at the edge, it's generated by things, it's generated by people, it's generated from devices, and it's generated from sensors and various other things, we have had to move the capabilities of the data center closer to the edge and find ways to exploit both the computing power for being able to do data analytics as well as to service applications. Because stranding resources such as accelerators inside of platforms at the edge is much more costly than putting them inside of centralized data centers in the cloud, where the reuse factor can be much higher.
Indeed, and when we think about some of those use cases, as you said, flying cars are a little bit George Jetson in a way down the line, but autonomous robots and factories and warehouses are already here, and we want that intelligence at the edge, as the new Intel Xeon processor allows us to have, where we can apply machine learning to, say, vision to see, did a human being walk into a line of traffic that a very heavy 2-ton robot might be putting someone at risk. And I think that this whole moving the intelligence to the edges is going to open up a whole new bunch of exciting industries and capabilities that we can change lives with. I wonder if I can, before we wrap up, just one last question. I'd love to get any advice you could offer service providers and enterprise customers as they navigate their way through this exciting journey to leverage all these new and emerging technologies such as edge networking and edge computing and the Internet of Things and the industrial Internet of Things, but in particular 5G. And if there's any actionable things they can sort of take away from this. As a final question, what kind of advice could you offer? Because you're better positioned than anyone on the planet, I think, to give us not just these great insights you've shared today, but also some key takeaways on what could I be actioning, what can I be talking about in my boardrooms or in my water cooler conversations to sort of go and get ahead of this curve now, because there's a lot of big challenges for these organizations, be the carrier, service provider, and telco industry, or the consumers as enterprise who are looking to leverage it in their central or regional offices.
Yeah, so when we talk in boardrooms, when we meet with customers at the CXO level, we obviously have a conversation about how technology gets consumed inside of their networks going forward. We talk to them around the 4G to 5G transition on network modernization. We talk to them about how they change their operational models to be more telemetry driven, analytical, leveraging data at the center and build this IT ops, DevOps, next-gen platform for being able to automate the network. We talk to them quite a bit around digital and growth transformation and how they monetize the edge in new ways. But foundationally, what we talk to them about is that the ability to do those three things is not a technology challenge, right? Certainly technology is an enabler, but it requires some level of structural transformation inside of their organizations. It is workforce retraining, it is growing the sets of skill sets, it is organizing in a way that makes technology more rapidly consumed and integrated, it is new operating models, it's the development of innovation programs internal to their company that allow them to exploit the capabilities of a software-defined programmable future. And I think that's how the cloud has proven out to be successful. It's enabled and exposed a set of capabilities and then turned it loose on an application developer ecosystem and IT organizations that have looked at it and said, these are what I need to be successful in the future. And what we found is that organizations have been built and structured to take advantage of the capabilities of the technology rather than deploying technology in the organizational structures in which they were defined.
Wow.
And that's a really important step for this industry is to get the workforce right.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic advice, and I really appreciate you sharing that, because I think a lot of organizations, no matter whether they're in the service provider space or the the consumer space as enterprise and businesses of any industry, whether it's banking and wealth management and finance or transport, logistics, aviation, they're facing some really big challenges around digital transformation, the pivot to cloud, figuring out how to get continuous development, continuous improvement, and all those agile fun things that we're challenged with now, and the shift to software-defined everything. To then, as you said, make sure that their HR departments actually even know what the roles that they're about to hire encompass and the skills they need, and reskilling their existing people. So I think we've got a pretty exciting 12 to 18 months ahead of us as organizations, particularly CSPs, find their feet around that. Well, Kevin, it's been fantastic to spend some time with you, and thank you so much for making yourself available to join us on the show. And I'm constantly amazed by how you managed to juggle this whole challenge of vice president and general manager. That's an interesting juggle itself, across that whole service provider strategy and solution space. And I mean, the division that you're in across Infrastructure Solutions Group has got such a broad challenge with all these big things coming at you now. I imagine that you, jump out of bed excited about doing your job, but that also at the end of the day, you're probably happy to put the phone down and get some family time.
Absolutely. Especially as we all look to stay safe in what are very complex times at the moment.
They are indeed. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for your time. Stay safe, and hopefully we'll see you again soon, and we'll have you on the show another time.
Same to you. Thank you.
Appreciate it.